Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our next codon ring, the codon ring of trials. Dun dun dun. So, this codon ring of trials includes gene keys 12, 33, and 56. The 56 is active this week, the week of July 18th, and the 33rd gene key becomes active starting July 31st for about a week. We already went through the 12th gene key or hexagram because it stood alone with its own codon ring of secrets. However, this codon ring, as with all codon rings, it doesn't matter what gene key is active this week. They're all playing out at the same time. And this ring of trials is really active for me. The whole thing, it has been quite a challenge, and it's going to continue to be a challenge. And I really appreciate this codon ring because it's one of the most. It represents the final three aspects that along our awakening journey that we are here to liberate ourselves from, because it's one of the most difficult aspects to see because it's our blind spot, and the most difficult because we're so attached to it. We're so attached to it we can't see that we're attached to it. So this is a really tough ring of trials. I mean, no kidding, ring of trials is a great name. Okay, so moving on, because we're here to talk about the Hebrew letter that contains this ring of trials. And that Hebrew letter is the first Hebrew letter of the alphabet, number 1, also known as Aleph. Aleph. So, Aleph represents the one, the number 1, meaning the oneness, that there is one being, and also the one, the individual. Excuse me, my stomach's growling. So its numerical value, of course, is 1, but it is also associated with 111. And this is based on calculations of the separate letters that make up the word Aleph. And it equals 111. So seeing 111 is an auspicious sign. Now, we never know what the sign really means, but our ego likes to say, oh, if I'm seeing 111, this is a great sign that, I'm awakening, great things are happening. But the ego never stops to think that, wow, it could mean that I'm really highly into the ego and illusory world. It doesn't look at the opposite. So seeing 111 regardless is a very potent energy and a very potent message. However, you have to be really honest with yourself and check to see, are you functioning at the illusory level, the ego level, or at the higher level? So either way, it's a wonderful number. And it comes from Aleph. So Aleph is considered that thing that is before all things. And that thing, it's not even a thing, it's before things, but it's that thing, we're limited by words here, that holds all things together. So it's also called the ineffable, that which cannot be spoken about. If you can describe it and put it into words, it is not the Aleph, it is not the Tao. I'm sure you've heard that saying. But then again, it is, and you'll understand why. Aleph is called, in the Hebrew tradition, the great wind that hovers over the waters of creation. It is the stillness, the silence. It is the word of God. It is also considered the great mind. It is the breath of divinity spoken. I think you can hear my stomach growling. Forgive me. I don't know what's going on. So it's the breath of divinity spoken. It is the primordial force, and it is the breath that gives all of life. And just as a side note, and I think will be applicable to while we're in this codon ring, the archangel that is the overarching being of this letter is Archangel or Archangel Metatron. And if you don't know, Metatron, when he was in physical form, was the prophet Enoch. So we can also call upon Metatron for any help with this letter Aleph. And by the way, all other letters, because Aleph is where all things originate, all the letters originated from Aleph. So Metatron is the overarching being for all the Hebrew letters. Okay. In particular, what originally came out of Aleph were the three primary forces of the universe. And I'm going to list all the synonyms, all the three primary forces that we've heard of. So we're talking about 3 rays of creation, the 3 primary colors, or the 3 forces known as the law of 3, which is the active, the passive, the neutral force, or the positive, negative, and neutral. What else? Also known, these forces are also known as awareness, aliveness, and activity. The electron, proton, the neutron, also known as the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. we can keep going. The 3 forces of the mental, emotional, and physical planes. And also Aleph represents the 3 top spheres of the tree of life, the first 3 triangles that represent Keter, which is the crown of life, also connected to the first ray of creation, Bina, which represents understanding, the second ray of creation, and Chokmah is wisdom, the third ray of creation, which is active intelligence. How do we use our understanding in activity in life? Aleph is not an active force. It just is. What it is, it's simply a channel or a passageway to the light. And it is also called the grand unifier. We can also, more descriptive, how do we describe Aleph? We can say, for those of you familiar with the gene keys and hexagrams, we can say that Aleph is the space between the lines. It is not the painting, but the canvas, okay? So it is the space within all things and the space between all things. So it's the space that connects all things. And here is where the paradox comes. It is the space that connects all things. It's the space that came before all things. But because it's the space where all things are created and manifested and active, it can also be spoken about. So it is a paradox. It is the unmanifest and the manifest at the same time. And it's the individual and the wholeness. So it represents pure non-duality. There is no separation. That's all inclusive of everything because everything arises from it. Okay, so what else do we want to say about Aleph? I guess I should show you an image of it. So here we go. Here we go. So let me move this. I'm sure you're seeing it perfectly. I've got to move some things around. So here, this symbol Aleph is made up of 2 different Hebrew letters. The top and the bottom are called, is the Hebrew letter Yod, which is the number 10, which represents a manifestation of God. And this represents the higher realms and the lower physical realms. And what connects these 2 realms is this other letter called Vav, which is number 6. And the number 6 represents, what do you guess? It represents the spine in man. So our spine. That is what connects us. And what is it that activates our connection and animates our life? It is our breath. And if you take this symbol of Aleph and kind of make this Vav be vertical, then what this represents is, because it's related to our breath, it represents the trachea in man, and the two yods represents the two lobes of our lungs. Okay, isn't that fabulous? Let me see what else. So we activate our connection, our spinal, our central nervous system through our breath. And anyone on the spiritual journey knows how important our breath is. Okay. And let me stop share. Okay, here we are. We're back again. So what else do I want to say about Aleph? Let me look at my notes. Oh, yes. So in that symbol, that lower yod represents our lower sexual urges and sexual energies, the sexual waters, and the upper one represents the higher waters of consciousness. And this is why song and prayers and doing mantras are so powerful, because they utilize the power of our breath, the wind in our lungs. And what happens is many of the mantras, first of all, before you do anything, talking, singing, praying, what do? You do, you take an in-breath. But many of the mantras and singing has the ah sound, particularly like om. It starts with the A, so it has an om. It has an ah sound. And this ah sound in particular, like Sam, Ham, these are all mantras, Indian mantras, have that ah sound. And that ah sound, what it does is when you're doing these mantras, what you'll feel quite often, if not all the time, is you'll start to feel a tingling at the base of your spine, a little sexual feeling. And what we don't want to do is spill that energy, because that is your kundalini energy, your essence, your true essence. And through the breath and the singing of these ah sounds, these mantras, that travels up your spine, and you'll feel it vibrating in your throat. And therefore you're connecting sexual energy with the throat. You're connecting kundalini with the throat, and it's your God force, and you're experiencing your God force, your essence that is being expressed. And it's highly transformational process. So that's what's happening. That is the reason for mantras, because it's a vibratory thing that you can do through your lungs and the breath, and it takes that sexual energy and it rises it through your spine up to your throat, and then eventually into your other points in the head for awakening. Okay, what else do we want to say? Aleph also means bull or ox, and it is associated with the bull. And it is associated with the bull and the sign Taurus, I believe, because Taurus is associated with the throat. Now, the symbol of Aleph is the trachea and the lungs, but of course, like many, many letters in the Hebrew alphabet, it is all about the throat. And what is the throat? The throat is the symbol and the housing of our ego will and divine will. Okay, so it's the seat of the ego will. And and what's related in Hebrew mysticism is this myth by the Persian master Mithras. And he spoke about, there's this picture of the statue, I think that came from Mithras, or some mythological story, that there's the slaughtering of the bull, right? And they're slicing the throat of the animal. And obviously this is symbolic, but in many traditions they've done it. They sacrifice an animal by slicing their neck, and it's horrible. I don't even like talking about it. But what this symbol was meant to represent was the bull represents man, a very kind of dense, bullish being, right? And the throat being the seat of the ego will, the slicing of the throat means sacrificing of the ego, right? To get to the God source. So that's what that symbology is all about. So no need to go out and sacrifice any animals. I'm highly against it. So just sharing that little tidbit with you. Oh, I also want to share that because Aleph can be associated with Taurus, but in other systems, in the system I found resonance with, it is connected with the planet Pluto. And we know that Pluto is all about transformation, death, and rebirth. And I think Pluto is highly active in our skies right now. So this fits very nicely. Okay, speaking in gene keys terms with this codon ring, this codon ring represents the three major aspects of our ego, these ego drives that we have to sacrifice. And the first one that we can look at briefly here is our desires. This is our drives by the physical senses, our drives for pleasure. And this is directly related to the 56 gene key, which is active right now, basically, right now, or starting tomorrow, I can't remember, the 19th. And it's how we find all kinds of distractions in life in the outer external world through our five senses. And particularly, this gene keys talks about how we're drawn through our visual senses, like entertainment, movies, television, reading, being just taken in by what the outer world has to offer us. And even in my opinion, it wasn't stated in the gene keys, but I can see that even going out into nature and taking everything into the external world, and while it feels wonderful and it's very grounding, it's also a distraction. And it's keeping our eyes active, and it's keeping us from closing our eyes and turning our attention inward, right? To keep us trapped into the illusion of everything that is manifest, right? And it's keeping us from looking within to find the great Aleph inside of us, being, So that is the physical aspect that we're here to sacrifice, right? Our desires, our physical senses and drives. What else? I had something to say about the eyes. Oh, yes. You know how they say the eyes are the window to the soul. And this is true, but the ego, and the I Ching talks about this, that staring into people's eyes, like trying to get to know them, staring into them, or walking around and trying to connect with people through their eyes, that this is really ego driven. And I have completely found this to be true, that when you're looking from the ego's perspective, you try to look into somebody's eyes, like trying to get a sense of who they are, and looking at their physical eyes. But let's see, how do I explain this? And that just doesn't work. You try to figure somebody out, and that's an ego motivation. But you're not really supposed to be looking at the physical eye. And it's not your eyes that are meant to be looking at the other person. I'm probably not making sense, but it'll make sense in just a second. So when I was doing a meditation retreat, I can't remember the circumstance, but I was with a teacher in meditation, looking at their eyes. And it was just plain as day. I was drawn in past the eyes to what was behind the eyes. And I immediately felt, oh, no one's there. There's nobody there. Ego was gone, right? And so we are meant to look past the physical eyes, to look and try to find who is the seer behind everyone's eyes, right? We have the physical eyes and all the apparatus to receive the information, to receive the visible world. But who is the seer, or what is the seer? And of course, Aleph is the seer, right? The Tao is the seer. It is this empty space. And that is what we're supposed to be able to see, is that there's nobody there. So that's how the eyes are the window to the soul. As well as personally, if we were to close our eyes and turning our attention inwards or even backwards, right? Instead of like closing our eyes in meditation and looking outwards, trying to see that big purple swirling, whatever's going on, that blackness, turn our attention back into ourselves and you're going to realize nobody's there. And that is your true self. So in that sense, the eyes are the window to the soul, but not from the egoic thing, trying to figure out, oh, I see past lives in your eyes. That is purely ego motivation, or trying to look somebody in the eye when you're out shopping. That's an ego motivation. It's a fine discernment and discrimination there. Okay, I'm done with that little soapbox. So let's move on to the second layer that we're here to sacrifice. And this would be the second layer. It's our own forgetting, that we've forgotten who we are. The veil has been dropped, and we become trapped by our own akash, or our own memories, also known as our sanskaras, our karma, our suffering. So we get caught up in our personal stories and all of our thoughts. So we become victim to the lower mind that has created all of these concepts and images for us, and all of these little eyes floating around. So that would be the mental body that we're here to sacrifice. Okay, let's see. And that's gene key 33. So these 3 gene keys represents the 3 lower bodies of man that we're here to sacrifice. And the third one, the third trial in this codon ring of trials, is obviously the emotional body, the heart, or our love. And this one is vanity of vanities. It's the most difficult to see and recognize. It is our blind spot, and it's so difficult. Boy, I can tell you, it's sure coming up for me. Anyway, this is about, as Richard puts it, being in love, infatuated with our own uniqueness, our own external expression. Like, I'm so different from everybody else, and I just love it. You know, here I am. As well as this one is really associated with the throat, right? Our expression, loving the sound of your own voice. I personally cannot stand the sound of my own voice. I'm so tired of hearing myself talk. And to me, this is a good sign. And as a side note, you know that phenomena of when you hear yourself on a recording and you hate the sound of your own voice? I'm wondering, now I don't know if somehow in the recording something gets distorted, but I have a feeling that the recording of our own voice reflects back to us our own egoic distortions, and we hear it and we don't like it. So something to think about. Or I'd like your input. I don't know how you feel about that, but I personally can't stand the sound of my own voice. I just keep rambling on and on like I'm doing right now. But this third trial is about the love, the sound of your own voice, which kind of people who are real big talkers and use their voice and talk and talk and talk, you know, it gives them away a sense of power. It's the sense of their own uniqueness. And Richard indicates that people who use their voice an awful lot as a means of, like, this is who I am, blah, 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 I talk a lot, that they end up being they're very intelligent, creative, and artistic folks. And that this can be, it's, what am I trying to say? It is the most vanity vein of all, because you see this as your God-given expression, and you can't see how it's trapping you into the illusion of your own uniqueness. Like, you're so attached to your physical expression that you can't see the Aleph behind all things. And this is where I've said this many, many times. You have to be willing to sacrifice your own uniqueness. You have to be willing to sacrifice, um, you have to be willing to be ordinary, to become a nothing, to not be noticed. And this is so terrifying for people, to not be noticed. You have to be willing to sit alone in your own aloneness without any visual distractions, television, music, sound, whatever, nothing for your five senses to take in, and just turn within and feel that great aloneness within you, which, of course, that aloneness, once you tap into it, you're going to recognize it's the all oneness, right? So it is not the love of our own uniqueness that we need to tune into, but rather the sameness, this beautiful, empty Aleph, great wind space that connects us all. That's what we're here to fall in love with, as well as our own uniqueness, but, to a very nice, balanced way. So, what else can I say? I think I've said enough. I'm tired of hearing my own voice. So perhaps this is a time we can, helping to transmute any of these things that might be challenging you during this ring of trials, call upon Metatron, call upon Aleph. In fact, of all the letters, because all the letters originate from the great wind, keep this letter with you, right? It is your ah, and it's your aha. It is Aleph. Let that be your guiding light forever and ever and ever. Amen. Until next time.